It's an exciting time around the UCL Training Center as most of this Broncos team took to the field this morning for day one of voluntary organized team activities, including the quarterbacks, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. Hello, everyone, and welcome inside for another edition of Broncos Beat. I'm Alexis Perry, joined today by the usual dynamic duo of James Palmer from the NFL Network and the man from the Fan, Cecil Lammey. And we are so thrilled that ESPN senior writer and absolute legend, Jeff Legwold, could join us today as well. Guys, we will get into what was said after practice today, but first, Leggy, you were one of the select media members invited to watch from the UCL Training Center. So who or what caught your eye during that media viewing window this morning?
Well, Alexis, obviously everyone's going to want to talk about the quarterback, but I guess my advice would be don't pay attention yet. That's the message is it doesn't mean a whole lot right now. But in terms of on the field, I think the attendance is what sticks out. I mean, the Broncos were one of the first teams to sort of publicly issue a co-statement with the PA earlier this offseason, yet they had almost every player save for, 8 or 10 or so on the field. So high level of participation. And I think some of that was Vic Fangio actually discussed with the players, all right, what would the workouts, what tweaks can be made. And I think one of the tweaks we could see today, some of the players left the field briefly to go in and work in the weight room and then come back out. So obviously they've tried to make this efficient. They've tried to get as many people here as possible because let's face it, this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs in quite some time, and low attendance is not going to break that string. So I think they were very effective. Veteran players across the board, Kareem Jackson here, Von Miller here, both quarterbacks here. So just a high level of veteran presence. And that's what struck me today was just the level of players on the field and sort of going through. And you can't, even in these drills, you can't help but not see what Patrick Surtain can do. So the number one pick is going to play plenty.
Yeah, and I know it's graduation time across the country, but it feels like it's back to school because we're talking about schedule and attendance. And Melvin Gordon not being out there for me, I know it's voluntary and all that, but again, we look at these competitions that are coming up. We will talk about quarterbacks. We can't help ourselves but to talk about Teddy Two Gloves and Drew Lock and what's going to happen this year. But I just look at Javonte Williams. PS2 is a special player, as Leggy points out, and will continue to point out for us all season long. But Javonte Williams could come in and be that guy. Melvin Gordon is a guy that, he was nervous about last year in a position battle he was in with Philip Lindsay. All due respect to Lindsay, Javonte Williams could be better in this league. So Melvin Gordon's got his hands full. We'll see how that shapes up, but weren't able to see anything like that today.
Well, you guys, Drew Lock spoke to the media today, and he said he's excited to be a part of this competition and to push himself to a different level. What did you guys note about his mindset heading into this quarterback battle when he was talking with the media? JP?
I think Drew, and I think you guys will probably agree with me, when you talk to him one-on-one or in a media setting, he really draws you in. He's always a guy that you kind of want to just root for. He has such a great smile and engaging personality that you always kind of come away going like, I hope that guy succeeds. And that today was one of those days as well. But at the same time, seeing him there kind of in person, you can tell he's a little bit more cut. He's a little bit more in shape. He's really, really worked hard. And I think what I got most out of this, Alexis, was that he really wanted to make sure. And the funny part is he didn't brag about it too much in any sense. He kind of even bit his tongue a little bit in talking about what his offseason routine was. But really, he really showed us that he was going to have no regrets by how he was going to approach this offseason. He always has been known as a guy that kind of works pretty hard and always will try to do different things to get better. But it seems like he took it to another level this offseason, knowing what's at stake, knowing he's blocked out so much, knowing he has really put, with the help of many other people, a lengthy regimen of how he was going to go about this process, working his mental makeup, Cecil, and working his footwork, which I know you talk about at length. And that's going to be where your eyes are going to be when you start getting out there on the practice field. And then also throwing with guys. I think he has shown to all of us the work that he's put in. We were hearing rumblings about it but hearing him talk about it and hearing how much it meant to him, I think it meant a little bit more to all of us now in the effort he's putting forth in this quarterback battle.
Well, and I think it's kind of getting rid of the baby fat, if you will. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it.
I was going to say it, Cecil.
But
I was going to say it.
I mean, it seems like that what he's done, right? You talk about him being cut physically. I'll talk about his haircut. It's more serious. You know, he's got that mindset. And this is what he needed to do from day one. He didn't know he needed to do it. And now he does, painfully so. But having a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, you heard all the players talk about it today. They love Teddy. Teddy's this guy. He can show up. He can push through Lock. It's exactly what Lock has needed. And he's needed that from day one and finally has that. You see the serious tone. You hear those things. We all will be seeing it on the football field during practice as well.
One last note, Alex, I want to say is I think, guys, the thing that jumped out at me the most is when he said, I might look back at this competition and say it took me to a level of play as a player that maybe I wouldn't have gotten to if I wasn't in this competition. That comment really kind of jumped out at me, that he's got a great mindset in how he's approaching this. And at the same time, he thinks this might be the best for him in terms of making him a better player. That comment really, really stood out to me.
You guys, the Broncos will not hold any team periods during these first 6 OTAs. So without any 11-on-11 work, how can Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater separate themselves from one another in these 7-on-7 drills, or can they even?
One thing, and I work in radio, so I understand hot takes that I can't stand, by the way, but listen, we're going to go back and forth, and Teddy's day, Teddy won the day, and Drew won the day. Nah, the coaches will know behind the scenes as this progresses, and Coach Fangio talked about it. You're really not going to see that separation. Leggy brought it up as well. I wholeheartedly agree. It's hot, James, to say like it's Teddy's day or it's Drew's day, but really it doesn't matter until we get to training camp and to the preseason games. Most importantly, I will say this though, when there is a mistake made, let's say 7-on-7 and Drew throws a pick, how does he respond to that mentally? The pressure is there. He knows the pressure. He talked about the pressure, James. So I want to see how he responds. Still doesn't mean anything till we get to preseason games, but I want to see how he responds when he makes a mistake.
Guys, I can't believe you're not excited about some of these throws this offseason. A rollout to his left across his body got Zach Wilson drafted number 2 overall on a play that was on air at his pro day. Come on, these throws matter. No, I'm just kidding. Really, they don't. But what I do think coaches do look at, and Leggy and Cecil, you guys are exactly right in the 7-on-7 throws and who won this day. What they are observing, though, Alexis, is those little moments too. Those interactions of leadership, who you can see how quickly guys are picking things up. This is new for Teddy, so how quickly is he picking things up? Little intangible things can be, I don't want to say graded, but noticed by coaches during this time, as opposed to just throws on air or throws in 7-on-7. I think a little bit of your makeup can be seen. The growth of Drew Lock could maybe be seen as we're talking about him and his new haircut, as Cecil says. But at the same time, when the bullets start flying a little bit more, that's going to be an interesting spot. And Cecil mentioned, how do the players react when, say, a pick is made and a pick is thrown? I want to see if there's going to be a switch. Does Vic go, no, throw Teddy in there if Drew throws a pick? Or if Teddy throws a pick, he said, no, I want to see Drew again. Like, I kind of want to see what they do and handle those type of moments when we get into training camp as well.
All right, still to come, there were a few guys absent from OTAs today, but there was one in particular that stood out most to me. We'll discuss who we miss most today after the break. Welcome back to Broncos Beat. It was a stellar turnout for the first day of OTAs today, but I think we could all agree that it would have been just that much better if Bradley Chubb was out there. News broke over the weekend that the Broncos edge rusher recently underwent arthroscopic surgery to remove a bone spur in his ankle. He will miss OTAs and mandatory minicamp recovering from that procedure. I had mixed feelings when I heard the news, but what was your initial reaction, JP, when you learned that he'd be out for the next couple of months?
Well, you don't want to see a guy that's as dominant as Bradley Chubb missing any sort of time this offseason, specifically with the expectations that everybody has for this defense. And we want to see Bradley Chubb and Von Miller together. I mean, everybody's been dying since that rookie season of Bradley Chubb's to where we haven't seen them together. And, you know, he had 12 sacks and Vaughn had a bunch of sacks, and we're trying to see that again. I do think when Vic Fangio said it was good news that they thought maybe he'd be returning the middle of training camp. And then when they went in there and actually did the procedure, they actually realize that he should be ready for training camp. I think that's a really, really big thing, because the way the NFL works is, and things have changed over the years. Leggy's been covering this league for an eternity, and he knows that you can't just have one good pass rusher anymore. You need multiple pass rushers. Teams are too good, Leggy, at sliding over and giving extra help and chipping if you just have one guy. It just doesn't work. So you need that yin to the yang on both sides, and we're waiting for it. This is kind of like, I think, making all of Broncos country a little fearful that yet again we won't see it. But I'm hopeful in the mindset of Von Miller. He didn't want to talk about it too much, Leggy, about where he thinks they could be in terms of pass rush duos. But we all kind of in the back of our mind know how good they could be if they're both healthy.
Certainly so. And I mean, and I think this is a case where it's tough to work the timing. You know, the ankle is bothering him some of the time. So they're trying to gauge, okay, how much do we wait? How much do you have patience? Or do you just deal with it now? And I think they finally got to a point where the days it was bothering him were starting to outnumber the days where it wasn't. So, you know, again, I think they were fairly happy by what they found when they got in there. I mean, they sort of expected the worst and then found it to be a little bit better, that they could deal with it, and that, you know, now he could be ready for the start of the regular season. But you know, I think I know guys in the league, coaches who want to see these guys play together just because they like football. And, you know, I think it's really an odd thing to have come this far. You know, when Chubb was drafted, all you saw was multiple seasons. They were just going to be this, you know, maybe the best bookend rushers in the league. And now we're still kind of just waiting for it to appear. And if it could appear, the secondary will be so much more improved that it would put them on a level defensively they're going to need to be to compete in the division they play in, with Patrick Mahomes leading the way.
You guys, someone who we were all excited about, like you guys have all mentioned, is Chubb's right-hand man, Von Miller. Coach Fangio said that there's no doubt in his mind that he could get back to where he was 4, 5, 6 years ago, but he'll need to kind of channel his inner Phil Mickelson and work harder to get back to where he was. So if Von Miller can get back to Super Bowl 50 MVP Von Miller and Bradley Chubb is at full health, honestly, like, what are realistic expectations for this duo? I know you guys have kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's delve a little deeper.
You know, what could we expect from Bradley Chubb? I still think there's a 20-sack season there for him. I really do. If he got 14 or 15 this year, that sounds about right. Vaughn could probably do about the same still at this point. And to see the dominance that we were once promised and so very excited about when the Broncos passed on a quarterback like Josh Allen and they took a guy like Bradley Chubb, we wanted to see those results. We haven't really seen them yet.
Alexis, first part with Vaughn, and I think we all loved hearing from him again, and just that Vaughn personality that lights up a room. But I love when Vic Fangio talks about Von Miller. You know, he is kind of, you know, rough about how he talks about a lot of his players, but Vaughn's a little bit different, right? Each time he talks about him, because he has such high expectations for Von Miller, he knows what type of player he can be. And some people were texting me that were listening to that press conference going like, man, I feel like Vic's kind of down on Vaughn. I'm like, no, I think he just knows how good he can be, and that's how he's always going to talk about a player that he knows has a ceiling higher than almost anybody else's that's rushing the passer. I think, Leggy, a realistic thing is they can both be at 15. But at the same time, it's not just sack numbers. It's how quickly are they back there? How quickly are they throwing the timing off for a secondary that we have high expectations for? How are they causing offenses to be, you know, struggling with their timing and moving quarterbacks off their spots? I think, you know, I know the way you break down the tape, Leggy. So it's not just sacks, it's how much they impact the game throughout the course of a game, that a lot of those things aren't on the stat sheet.
Yeah, you know, and I think these days the ball comes out so fast, you're almost in a sort of collapse and collate situation. You know, keep the quarterback where you want him as a defense. Don't let him be where he wants to be. And that's what they can do, because, you know, now to get Vaughn to sort of Super Bowl 50 level, that, I mean, the list of guys who have taken over a championship game on the defensive side of the ball is a fairly short one. Yep. And he's at the top of that. So that is like the ultimate level of his play. But if they can even get sort of close to that, and a lot of this is up to Von. He has to keep that edge. That's the one thing I think Vic Fangio wants to see from him. And for people to say Vic Fangio's down on Von Miller, I would say you have not spent nearly enough time talking to Vic Fangio about Von Miller. Vic Fangio's been a defensive coach his whole career in the NFL. He knows the value of a high-end pass rusher, potentially a gold coat pass rusher. And, they don't come along very often, and players like Von Miller don't come along very often. But I want to see if Von has that on-field edge that I saw last training camp. To me, that was going to be the difference and what lifted him to what I thought would be an enormous season last year. And if he can recapture that, there's no reason to think he can't get to that level again where he's a dominant defensive player in the league.
Steve, really quick.
Well, and when Vic Fangio talked about Von Miller, it's because he knows he can do it. Just like when Pat Swilling won the defensive MVP of the league in '92, and Vic Fangio didn't say much to him until after he won that award, and Fangio told him, "I knew you could do it all the time, kid."
I love it. Well, that's enough of my questions for the day. Coming up after the break, these guys will answer your questions, Broncos Country. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Broncos Beat, guys. After an entirely virtual offseason last year, I think I could speak on behalf of Broncos Country when I say just seeing most of the Broncos on the field for OTAs today was a sight for sore eyes. So with it finally feeling like football again, I thought it would be cool to give Broncos Country the opportunity to ask the experts some of their burning questions on their minds for this offseason. So let's start things off with Andrew on Twitter. He wants your thoughts on if it will be KJ Hamler or Tim Patrick as the Broncos' number 3 wideout.
Well, me, Alexis, always thinking about fantasy football, and I go, well, Hamler's that guy you want in the slot. Tim Patrick's your backup to Cortland Sutton. And when I think of all of these receivers, these great weapons, even on a run-heavy team, I believe that Cortland Sutton could be that breakout fantasy star for everybody that he was supposed to be last year before the injury. And then Hamler working as that third guy because of his speed, his quickness, his ability to take short passes, turn them into long gains. He's their version of Tyreek Hill. And I could see him working as that third guy. And then Patrick, obviously, high value target, high value backup. And then you go to 4 wide receivers. That's when Timmy Pats would get on the field.
I love that we're talking about fantasy football already. It is May. This is great. Also on Twitter,
Cecil can't stop.
Wondering, with all the talk about Quinn Miners getting snaps at center, what are your thoughts about Lloyd Cushenberry going into year 2, Leggy?
I think this is another case where they want to push somebody they like, and they like Lloyd Cushenberry. Sure, but the one thing defensive coaches around the league would say he was missing a bit at times is that physical presence in the middle of the field. That's what Miners brings. He plays with an edge, and the fact that I've known Mike Munchak since he was a player, and the fact Munch has put him at center to start with tells you what kind of potential they believe he has in the middle. And it also tells me they want that physical edge. And I think that would be Cushenberry's steps. Everyone talks about what Drew Lock's got to do, but every player has something they better address if they want to stay in their position. And for Cushenberry, that is just that physical edge. Can you stop the bull rush in the middle of the field and take on a player who may be bigger and stronger than you and handle it at the point of attack?
JP, Buck is wondering, what do you guys think the identity of this offense will be this year? What should fans expect?
Hey, Buck, how's it going? And maybe you should direct your next question towards Leggy and ask him what it was like when the players were wearing leather helmets and he was writing everything about covering the NFL longhand and then turning it in that sense. But listen, I think the identity of this offense, hopefully, is going to be we're not going to turn the football over. And I think that's kind of the biggest part of it. They'll take our shots and we'll find our different spots. You heard Von Miller talk about how he'd love to see 2 tight end sets in the future moving forward. And he loves Noah Fant. Keep an eye on Noah Fant. Von Miller probably is going to draft him in the first round of his fantasy draft as we talk about that fantasy game, Cecil. But I do think you're going to see them run the football and you're going to see them try to limit the ability to make turnovers because of how good we think this defense is going to play. And I think that's going to be a big part of this quarterback battle. It's going to be a big part of this running back battle that we haven't really touched on a whole lot between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. I think what we're going to see in the backfield throughout all of camp 2 is Where are the touches going? How are they getting the football? And are we finding high percentage ways to move the football down the field? I think that's a big part of this offense. And Cortland Sutton, the big body receiver that he is, that Cecil's talking about, I think as well, it's a high percentage throw. It's not really a 50-50 throw when you throw some of these passes to Cortland Sutton. So I think finding an identity of making sure you keep your offense on the field, move the chains, and limit your turnovers.
You look for windows as a passer. Windows, like the leg he's got behind him, the sky. Cortland Sutton's always open because of that blue thing behind Jeff Legwold. But Leggy, George Payton's told us the identity this entire offseason through his moves. It's physical. And that's what I think of when I think of this Broncos team, Leggy, is I think of a more physical team, beat you up on offense, run the ball down your throat, turn around on defense and do the same thing so that when you're done playing the Denver Broncos, you're going to feel it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest mistake the Broncos could make is you're going to try and beat Mahomes and the Chiefs at their own game. No, they have already got that under control. You're not going to win that way unless you have a player as special as Mahomes running it. So you've got to think of another way, and I think they have what Cecil's saying and James both, that they've addressed the physicality of this team and the overall athleticism. I think they have more team speed. And I think they can be more physical. Again, it's got to play out, but right now I like the construction of that aspect of it.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Broncos Beat. But for more Broncos TV content, scan the QR code on your screen. We'll be off next week for Memorial Day, but tune in to KTVD Channel 20 at 6:30 for a Broncos television special you will not want to miss.